What does deception look like in the spiritual life, and how does it impact the life of a Christian believer? The answer is that it's subtle, and it can be quite devastating with long-lasting consequences. This is Eric Slay with the UWM Pen Guy, and this is the Bible Commentary. As always, if you liked what you're seeing, I'd ask that you hit like and subscribe in order to help the channel grow. And now, without further ado, let's get into the Word. So, today we're going to move on to a block of text from Joshua 9, probably spend a couple of videos on it, on the theme of deception. So let's read verses 3 and 4. But when the inhabitants of Gibeon heard what Joshua had done to Jericho and to Ai, they on their part acted with cunning and went and made ready provisions and took worn-out sacks for their donkeys and wineskins, worn out and torn and mended, with worn-out patched sandals on their feet and worn-out clothes, and all their provisions were dry and crumbly. Sorry, I ended up going through verse 5 because that was the whole thought. So here we see, as Paul suggests, that Christian believers are not ignorant of Satan's devices, that there's a Greek word in the New Testament, panorgia, it's craftiness, subtleness, subtlety. It's appearing to be something that you are not. Indeed, the word hypocrite, which I'll put up a couple samples here, occurs a shocking number of times in Matthew chapter 23 when Jesus accuses the Pharisees of being hypocrites. The word was a theater term that referred to what an actor did on a stage. And so you think about applying that to religion, and the result is cataclysmic. Emphasizing in that case that kind of hypocrite deceives himself as much as he deceives other people. But here we see the, I guess, original kind of hypocrite or deceiver, where they know that they're putting on an act, and their victims do not. Now we can see how we have basically the two kinds of human being here. We saw in the previous verses the quote-unquote secular human being, the one who, when facing disaster, simply musters his resources and redoubles his effort, doubling down on the foolish behavior that had gotten him into trouble in the first place in the sight of God. And here we see the hypocrite, as I was talking about with the Pharisees. We see the deceptive person. You have a parallel to this in the story of Jacob and Esau, where Esau was a hairy, ruddy man, a hunter, and Jacob was basically a mama's boy who was ready to scheme with his mother to deceive his own father to inherit a blessing which culturally did not belong to him, but according to the will of God did. And God brought about his will through that. That's a whole nother subject, a fascinating one for another time. Now, you interestingly enough have a sort of reversal of the principle of Moses' staff, you could call it, in verse 4, where the things that the Gibeonites are bringing here are the objects that are being used backhandedly by God to accomplish his purpose. Moses' staff was an object that God used as a sort of channel, or I suppose you could say indicator that the power of God was active. He didn't really channel his power through the staff. The staff simply indicated when the power of God was going to move. And likewise here, we have these objects indicating that God's providence is coming against the foolish decision to discipline the leaders of Israel for the foolish decision they're about to make here, and to bring a a remarkable degree of mercy upon the inhabitants of Gibeon, who, like the other Canaanites, deserved nothing but doom and destruction. And so you have here an alternative to what we saw in chapter 8, or a counterpoint or a co-point to what we had in chapter 8, where the Israelites used subterfuge as a stratagem and defeated the Canaanites under God and by God's command. But here we see how a device without a spiritual context can become destructive. That words, for example, the scripture is sharper than any double-edged sword, but without the power of God, it is merely words. And it can actually be used to bind heavy burdens on people. This is what the Pharisees, the ultimate hypocrites, did. And so for today, I would just encourage any believer to be wary of the panordia, the craftiness of the devil. I would encourage anyone who does not know the Lord to ask, are you a hypocrite? Don't count on God making a special provision for you like he did for these Gibeonites here. Expect the end will be more like the Pharisees who were destroyed with the rest of Jerusalem when the Romans came and smashed the temple in 70 AD. And so until next time, this is Eric Slawick, the UW and Pendry, and this has been the Bible Commentary.